Soups, thank you for coming on the Easy Pray podcast today.
Absolutely. Happy to be a guest, Chris, and thanks for having me.
Glad to have you here. Can you give myself and the audience a little bit of background about who you are and what you do?
Sure, yeah. So I'm Soups. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Sardine. We are a 4.5-year-old venture-backed startup. We help about 250 plus companies in both in the financial services sector as well as online commerce sector with their fraud as well as their compliance needs, right? And on the compliance side, we do identity verification, know your business, as well as AML, anti-money laundering, transaction monitoring. On the fraud side, we are a behavior-based fraud prevention company, which means we look at a consumer's behavior when they are signing up or when they are doing a payments activity or when they're logging in. And by behavior, I mean, how are they typing? How do they hold the phone? How do they swipe, etc. And my prior background before founding Sardine, I used to be head of financial crime for Revolut in the UK. They are one of the largest neobanks. And then prior to Revolut, I used to be head of fraud for Coinbase. And I'm a machine learning engineer by training. And I live in Berkeley, California, and been practicing machine learning for fighting a variety of bad actors, be it in cybersecurity or click fraud, and now payment fraud slash identity fraud for pretty much my entire career. So, which is 20 plus years.
That's really cool. Was it your plan to get into, fraud prevention from the beginning, or was it something that caught your attention along the way, or something else?
Uh, yeah, so I have a PhD in double E, and my thesis was essentially about cybersecurity threats like denial of service attacks, and how do you scale up web services in the presence of distributed denial of service attacks. We're talking 2000 to 2005, and so when I went over to industry, one of the first companies I went to work for was selling software as well as hardware tools to telcos to detect bots, etc.,
Mhm.
and to filter out the bad traffic. Right. So that's how I got my break into applying machine learning slash data science to fight bad actors. And yeah, so uh, and then throughout my career, I have only worked at startups, so I knew always that I want to found a company. Uh, and yeah, so now really excited running my own company, fighting the bad actors and helping the world of finance get rid of bad stuff. Right?
Yeah, it will be a never-ending battle.
Yeah.
Uh, push them somewhere else for a little while.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So speaking of fighting bad actors, I try to
Hmm.
ask as many of my cybersecurity guests and kind of people in the counter fraud and counter scam space, have you ever been a victim of uh, a cybersecurity incident, a fraud, or a scam? And are you willing to share that story with us?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. So I've not been a victim of fraud or a scam online. However, I have been a victim of something that happened in person. So, uh, so the story goes that, I was approached by a couple of young guys who at my residence, and they said that this scam is called an Irish uh, home scam
Hmm.
because these were Irish speaking guys who came over saying, "Hey, I have this machine which we were just cleaning the pavement of the house next door, this high pressure machine and pressure wash, and we can pressure wash your driveway, which looks really dirty."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Okay, you can do it." And then they basically upsold me into, "Hey, you can also we can also paint your fence, and if you give us some cash, we'll run to the store and buy the paint." And after they did the pressure wash, I gave them the cash, and of course, they never came back.
Mm.
Right. So the moral of the story here is that uh, always do a KYB or know your business check on anyone who is offering to do any work for you. And of course, we are all aware that we should be doing KYB checks online, but
Yeah.
how many of us really do that check on a contractor who's going to do work for you around your house? So that I feel like is still like a big sort of a missing spot in the industry, right?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of people that will knock on your door and say, "Hey, I did work for your neighbor."
Yeah,
But when you ask them which neighbor, if you actually start asking them, well, which neighbor, they'll say, "Oh, well, the one
mm,
just down the street." Well, I know everybody down the street. Which one? They won't give you a name. Oh, no, no, I can't tell you that because they're my,
yeah,
they're just making up a story. Yeah,
yeah,
that's. I've moved to the position of just never answering the front door anymore.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I appreciate you sharing that. So let's jump back into what you're currently doing. What are kind of some
Mhm.
of the trends that you're seeing for your clients, and what are you guys doing to combat those trends?
Sure, yeah. So we work with a very diverse set of clients, right? So I can start with what trends we are seeing in the financial service industry, as well as move over to a few trends we see in the online commerce industry. I'll start first with the online commerce. So some of the biggest trends we're seeing is spike in things like refund scams, right? And the other trend we're seeing is what I would call triangulation fraud. So I'll start with explaining what is a triangulation fraud first. So, for example, you might be, um, on your favorite internet search provider, searching for, buying an airline ticket for your holiday, and you land on a website which looks decent. Uh, However, it's a phishing website,
Hmm.
right? But now here's the kicker: you actually do get delivered the ticket, right? So you entered your card. The fraudster, what they do is they take your card details and your billing address, et cetera, and they actually quickly go and buy a ticket for you from another site, right? And they do deliver the ticket to you. However, what they do is they add a surcharge, a fuel
Mm,
surcharge, right? So now, what is in there for the fraudster? Number one, the fraudster now has access to your card details,
yeah.
right? Which they can now use for buying anything else, right? A Rolex watch or booking themselves another vacation somewhere. And secondly, they also charge you a fuel surcharge, right? And if you're paying real close attention to your credit card statement, you would notice it one day. And then you actually go call up this phishing site, and they will refund you the air ticket because they go and they cancel the ticket on the real side, but they won't refund you the fake fuel surcharge,
Uh,
right?
that's awful.
Yeah. So so that's one. There's many versions of this triangulation fraud, right? It could be like applied to, you buying sneakers, they ship you the sneakers because they go and actually buy it on a Nike or Adidas store, but then they have your card details and they can do whatever they want with it, right? The
Do you
moral,
find, I have a question about that. Do you find
yeah.
that
Mhm.
most of the fraudulent portion of the transaction happens right away, or do they sit on the card details for 3 months, 6 months to try to get some separation from it?
Oh, no, no, no. They give you the goods right away.
Okay.
So yeah. So and then there's another version of it which I just heard, which is on the in the ticketing space as well, which is that suppose you want to go to your favorite baseball game, um, and you are right. You go online. Somebody says, "I can sell you the ticket," right? And they say that they can sell it a $500 ticket for $250,
Yeah.
right? Uh, what they're doing is that then they use a stolen card to go buy the ticket, the $500 ticket,
Yeah.
using someone else's card, and now they will, send you the ticket, the $250 ticket to you, right? Now, so they're making money two ways,
Yeah.
basically. Right? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
My wife works in an industry where they
yeah.
have seen that same sort of thing. Is that their company has been used to drop ship product out to somebody, and the credit card that was used to purchase it was stolen. And
Mhm.
then the other, the customer was charged on a different credit card for lower than the face value, and so
Right.
the person who receives the stolen goods, they're not stolen in a sense. They're not motivated to contact anybody because they got something at a really good discount.
Exactly. Exactly. Yep. Yeah. And then the third version of it that we are seeing is that, even on your, contactless card, tap to pay. So if you are, like at a restaurant or at a store, be very careful when you're handing over your card. First of all, don't ever hand it over,
Yeah.
right? You should do your tap to pay yourself because what a storekeeper might do is they tap it against a real terminal, but then they have another terminal hidden somewhere and they tap it against that as well,
Mm.
right? So you get double charged, right?
Yeah, it was. It's really interesting, and maybe you'll have an explanation for that. In the U.S., the U.S. has been really slow to adopt tap to pay, in my mind, as well as really slow to adopt like at the table card swiping. It was probably 10 years ago. My wife and I were in Canada and we went out to a restaurant and they brought the credit card machine to the table, had me insert the card in the machine. So, like, even though it wasn't tap to pay at the time, the card never left my possession. And my wife and I were thinking, why in the world are we not doing this in the US? And
Mhm.
so that whole concept of we're in the US, we're so used to the card leaving our possession for a transaction that it'd be really hard to protect against that. Is there a reason why retailers and restaurants are still have a single card machine hidden behind the counter somewhere? Not hidden, but just back behind the counter?
Uh, so this type of fraud, I've heard is happening in outside the US, right, where they have a different terminal.
Hmm.
And the thing it all comes down to, all these attack vectors, the thing it all comes down to is that uh, it is becoming increasingly difficult to verify identities of merchants, right?
Hmm.
So the storekeeper who tapped your card on another fake terminal, right? They got merchant acquiring, as in like another card terminal from a different processor or a
Hmm.
different bank, right? And somewhere along that chain, somebody failed to do what I would call know your business check or know
Hmm.
your merchant check properly, right? And they gave this merchant or this storekeeper like another terminal, and it'll be a while before the merchant acquiring bank finds out that this merchant was doing something shady. Right? It'll be a while, right? Because the thing is, two things are missing in the industry, which is where Sardine comes in. Number one is uh, it is very difficult to verify identities online, especially in the age of deepfakes.
Yeah.
And number two, there's a big need for doing real time uh, onboarding, real time transaction monitoring, and real time ongoing monitoring of a merchant or a consumer, right? And legacy systems were not built to do any of these things real time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Old credit card. I mean,
Mhm.
the legacy of credit cards is that physical swipe machine, which probably none of our listeners, you and I have seen those, but probably none of our listeners have seen
Mhm.
the card swipe machines, and
Mhm.
they had to mail it into their credit card processor at the end of the day or the end of the week.
Mhm. Mhm.
Is it just because of that legacy, or is it complicated to do these things real time?
It is complicated to do these things real time because you have to data is siloed across multiple different places. You have to bring it all together in one place, and then you have to do real time transaction monitoring. Um, what what we specialize in is essentially bringing all of the data together in one place, and then also building machine learning models or applying AI techniques to doing all this transaction monitoring in real time, right?
Hmm.
Um, and this is very true for both both commerce, right? Online commerce, retail, as well as it's very true for banks, right? Yeah, and for banks, what we're seeing is a couple of trends. One is there's a big rise in scams, right? Uh, like as banks are increasingly adopting real-time payment methods like Zelle
Yeah.
or soon to come RTP, real-time payments, or FedNow, right? The biggest attack vector is now shifting away from fraud over to scams, right? And like there's a variety of these scams, right? So there's romance scams, Zell scams, or tech support scams, or investment scams, right? IRS scams. They all of them are essentially like you get a call from someone who pretends to be from the IRS or what have you, and they convince you or socially engineer you into uh, sending all the money somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And once the money is gone via a faster payment method, then it's really gone, and there's no recourse for a bank to bring it back to the victim, right?
So what is, because this is kind of a, you know, the fraudster didn't technically gain access to the person's account. It was something that they convinced the consumer to do voluntarily. What are, without giving away the fraud prevention services, what are kind of some of the general concepts of how you tell whether a transaction like that is legitimate or not legitimate?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So there's a couple of things that we do, right? So number one, we look for patterns of hesitation during a transaction,
Hmm.
right? Or we look for uh, presence of abnormal behavior during a transaction. Abnormal behavior could be like you're doing a transaction, but you're still on the phone, right?
Hmm.
Maybe because you're talking to someone, or you are doing a transaction, but you're making screenshots, or you're recording the screen because the scammer convinced you to do so because the scammer needs evidence so they can get paid, right?
Yeah.
So, and then the other thing that commonly happens is that a lot of these scammers, they are convincing victims to install screen sharing tools on the laptops or even on the mobile devices.
Hmm.
Uh, these are uh, these are tools like AnyDesk, uh, uh, TeamViewer, etc. These tools are typically used to provide technical support, right? So, but now fraudsters are misusing these tools. And when, let's say, if I convinced you to install TeamViewer or AnyDesk, then I can literally see everything on your screen,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. And I could be controlling your screen. I could be moving the mouse on your screen. I can actually blank out your screen when I am on your bank account. I blank out your screen so you don't even know what I'm doing, and I move the money
Yeah.
out, right? So now what Sardine does is that if we build what we call uh, a device intelligence and behavior biometrics SDK, right, which is basically a piece of code that you embed in your bank's mobile app or on the bank's login pages on the website. This piece of code then informs the bank that there are multiple people on a screen doing things together, right?
Hmm.
And then a bank can, this happens in real time, then the bank can take steps to prevent that transaction from happening if they suspect there are multiple people behind the screen, right?
Yeah, that's really neat that we can now start doing real-time tech, and it's not solely looking at this is just an abnormal payment for a consumer, but
Mm-hmm.
the way they're using their device, the way they're using their computer in and of itself is abnormal, which is really neat to start seeing tech combating that, not facilitating fraud.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
So, are you seeing this sort of thing? I know that you also deal with like gift card exchanges. Like to me, that just seems to be an area that would be ripe for fraud, for money laundering. How does this, how does machine learning there protect those entities as well as their customers?
Yeah, no. So yeah, so we work with gift card exchanges, crypto exchanges, NFT platforms, and for all these platforms, what they're selling is essentially digital goods,
Hmm.
right? And when you're selling digital goods, that's the best thing that a fraudster who's sitting with a bag of stolen credit cards, that's the best thing they can buy because they can easily liquidate those things and they're not reversible, so you
Hmm.
cannot claw money back from them, right? Uh, so therefore, yeah, we have this saying at Sardine that if you can solve for fraud in these high risk industries, then you can solve for fraud elsewhere.
Yeah.
So yeah, we really cut our teeth in solving for fraud in these industries first, and we now work with the largest gift card exchanges, the largest crypto exchanges, the largest NFT platforms. And the nature of fraud is the following there, right? So which is uh, stolen credit card or stolen bank fraud. So I steal or I buy online on the dark web stolen credit card information as well as stolen bank details, and then I link it to a gift card exchange, and then I'm buying gift cards using the stolen payment instrument, and then I'm immediately sort of moving it off somewhere else and then trying to liquidate it, right? And where Sardine comes in is that we rely on uh, looking at intrinsic behavior patterns of a
Mhm.
consumer when they're making a purchase. Uh, Oftentimes, every fraudster has a tell, which means they always slip up, they always make a mistake, and that's how you catch them. For example, we go into all sorts of telemetry, like what is the angle of the phone when somebody is making a purchase? Is the phone face down when you're making a purchase?
Mhm.
And many other details that I can't really get into because I don't want to give away the
Yeah.
secret sauce. But that's all the intrinsic behavior patterns that we look for.
Yeah, that's without discussing it, I can think of like several things in my mind that are like, yeah, a normal human being would never
Hmm.
do this,
Yeah.
or very, very, very rarely do this. So does it
Hmm.
also with getting into kind of the integration a little bit, is it
Hmm.
there are certain things that we know this is a fraudulent transaction, so we're gonna stop it right now, and
Hmm.
then there's well, maybe there's a this looks like it could be fraudulent. Is that the sort of thing that you would escalate to a fintech's internal fraud team to look at in more detail,
Yeah.
that sort of thing?
Yep, absolutely. So what we do is we first of all, we are not a black box unlike other fraud prevention companies. So we give you all the reasoning behind someone's score being high, medium, low, and oftentimes what uh, our customers do is since we work in real time, so you can actually use a fraud scoring in the authorization step
Hmm.
itself, right? So therefore, you can make a decision based on a fraud score whether to even approve the transaction or decline the transaction,
Hmm.
or you can step them up. And when you step them up, you can again do automated step ups or manual. Automated step ups could be like, Sardine thinks this is a medium risk transaction. Let's do 3D secure, which is let's send some sort of a push notification back to the bank or the credit where this customer banks. Or in the US, not many banks support 3D secure. So we offer other types of step ups. Step ups could be like you could ask the customer to to upload a picture of their driver license
Hmm.
and take a selfie, right? Uh, and then the another step up could be you don't trust the credit card that they're using to make the purchase. So then you could say, hey, I'm gonna uh, do like some penny drop transactions in using your card, but I want you to go back and look at the amount that was entered and come back and verify your card that base.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or like you just step them up to a sort of a manual verification. The reality though is that we like to reduce these step ups as much as possible because that's where machine learning, if it's doing its job well, you should have most of the transactions being approved and very very few being declined.
Yeah.
And we bring to bearing a lot of data to fight credit card fraud or bank fraud. And oftentimes we are also convincing new untapped data sources to actually create data products. So besides our device and behavior data, we look at email history, we look at email reputation, we look at if you give a phone number, then what is the reputation of your phone number?
Hmm.
If you gave us a shipping address or a billing address, we look at the reputation of that address. And then finally, we recently launched a tool which allows us to match the name of a card holder with the card number itself.
Okay.
Because and this was kind of a did you know, for example, Chris, that when you doing when you're doing AVS with your credit card, did you know that your name is actually not being verified? You
It
could
is
actually
it is not
it's not
being
being verified.
verified. Yeah. Yeah.
No, yeah. So you could enter like Mickey Mouse and your card number, and it'll still get passed, right?
Hmm.
because when these systems were built, these were all like on DSL
Yeah.
lines, and they could not carry alphabets, right? So therefore, it's only now that we convinced one of the largest data providers to actually build a product, and Visa also is launching something similar. They call it account name inquiry. So we now are one of the most unique providers who can match the cardholder name to the card number, as well as the phone number, as well as their address. And these signals alone reduce like 25 to 35% of fraud. Right?
Are there? I'm going to try to get the phrasing of this right.
Mm-hmm.
Are there things that are done in financial industries outside of the U.S. that aren't done in the U.S. that we really should be doing in the U.S. or training our consumers to be able to do? If that's not vague enough.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's so many, right? So one would be for a variety of reasons, we haven't had much success in enrolling U.S. consumers uh, into 3D Secure, right?
hmm
3D Secure, and the reason is that not
Can you
many.
explain what 3D Secure is, since a
Yeah.
good chunk of the listeners aren't in the U.S., so we don't have an idea what that means?
Oh, sure, yeah. So 3D Secure is essentially, so the card schemes, so Visa, Mastercard, they came out saying that if you don't trust a particular card transaction, right, then you can send an SMS to the phone number linked at the bank account
hmm
where that card belongs, right? Now, the reality though is that not many people have their phone number linked in the bank account, or most of the banks in the US at least, they haven't really given consumers the option to enroll into 3D Secure,
hmm
right? And uh, it was relatively easier to do it in Europe, but in the US, it's been pretty much not been as widely adopted. If it were more widely adopted, then you could have used that as a step up and stop a lot of fraud, right? And fraud rates outside the US are much lower. Like in Europe, because 3D Secure is adopted, it's trade card fraud losses and the fraud rates are much lower than in the US. Right?
So why why is it more difficult to adopt
Mhm.
fraud prevention techniques in the U.S. than outside of the U.S.?
Because we have way too many banks here. For 4,000 plus banks,
Uh-huh.
including the credit unions, right? Yeah.
And so when there's new technology to roll out, the ones that are smaller and don't have the infrastructure to support it
Yeah.
kind of push back
Mhm.
against the legislation or the mandates to do that.
Or they just don't have the technical staff to even do it, right? Yeah.
hmm Yeah, that's disappointing.
Mhm.
I want the
Yeah.
best anti-fraud measures available to me as
Mhm.
a consumer, to
Mhm.
make sure that my cards are kept safe and my bank accounts are kept safe. And it's unfortunate that there are platforms that could help that just aren't available here.
Mhm. Yeah, no, but on the other hand, though, right, there's a lot of amazing things happening in the industry, right? So uh, startups like ours are being started to essentially fill the gap here, right?
hmm
So and we are helping, be helping a lot of small regional banks now with their fraud prevention measures. So yeah, change is coming.
That's good. Are there any trends that you're seeing in terms of fraud or scam that you're like, yeah, we've got this covered, but if other people don't have systems in place, there's this soon, let's call it a tsunami. I'm going to make up the words. This impending doom coming that if companies don't start upping their game, that they're going to be overwhelmed by. Are there any trends that are kind of alarming to you that you see growing?
Oh yeah. So the biggest trend that I'm concerned about is just the rise in scams, right? And if you look across the pond to the UK, they have had a faster payment method uh, for much longer than us, right?
hmm
So And now, if you look at the stats, then dollars being lost to scams has far eclipsed dollars being lost to credit card fraud,
Yeah.
right? So, and as US has now adopted, the variety of, uh, faster payment methods like Zelle, Venmo, etc., and with RTP and Fed now coming soon as well, consumers as well as businesses will be able to move money faster. Like if you look at it, wires have a few cutoff windows,
Hmm.
right? So 1 p.m. or 4 p.m. And therefore, a bank does have the time to actually review a transaction before they actually submit the wire or
Yeah.
let it go through. But with real-time payment methods, the moment it's submitted, the money is gone, right? So you have to uh, up your game quite a bit. All older banking uh, core payment systems were written in COBOL. They
Yeah.
cannot handle they cannot handle real time payments. So all the banks who are adopting RTP, FedNow, et cetera, they are rethinking the whole payment stack as well as the anti-fraud stack, right?
Hmm.
And so therefore, there's two things that are happening here. So one, as these technologies get adopted, we say faster payment means faster fraud. So we got to stop these in real time. And in order to stop it in real time, you need new technology, and that's where we're helping a lot of banks and payment providers with their faster payment fraud needs. Right?
So you're specifically saying like the UK was earlier to roll out real-time payments. Did they see a spike in fraud as that technology was rolled out, and that spike is now decreasing as people are more familiar with the technology and the risks associated with it? But in the US, we're still kind of on that on the upslope of adoption, and since people aren't familiar with it, there's more of an opportunity for the scams to take advantage of them.
Yeah, so in the UK, it's still on the upswing, and they are taking steps uh, to hold uh, folks accountable so that they're doing the right checks. So they recently passed a regulation in the UK saying that the sending bank has to do a lot of checks on the counterparty, on the recipient,
Hmm.
right? And the receiving bank similarly, they have to do checks on their counterparty, which is the sender, right? And if neither of them have done the right checks, as in is the money coming from the right individual or is the money going to the right individual? If neither of them have done the right checks, then there's a way to for a victim of fraud to get reimbursed by either the sending bank or the receiving bank, right?
Hmm.
And they've set up like a pot of money for via which like the victims can get reimbursed, right? We are way behind any of these regulatory mechanisms.
Yeah. So what can consumers in the US do aside from, being really careful about real-time fund transfers? Are there, are there ways that we can evaluate the banks that we work with to say, well, this one's doing more, this one's doing less, or are we all just kind of waiting for the technology to mature and it'll impact the anti-fraud technology will help everybody kind of at the same time, and we don't really have a whole lot of significant benefit of going to one institution over another.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's um, yeah, unfortunately, it's a little hard right now for consumers to really understand uh, that level of detail as to what type of anti-fraud measures their banks offer. We like to we oftentimes in our when we are brainstorming at Sardine, we have this thesis that what if we could help banks or online commerce companies who are using Sardine to have like almost like a Sardine inside or Sardine is
Yeah,
protecting you type of a framing. So then consumers, if they see that, then they can trust it much more, right?
yeah, yeah. Because
Yeah.
in my mind, and I'm probably not the normal bank customer in a sense that I would be willing to switch to a bank which had stricter fraud preventions.
Right.
Yes, that makes my life more difficult in my day-to-day banking when I'm doing potentially makes my life more difficult when I'm doing the
Hmm.
things that I want to do, but I
Hmm.
want to be, have an order of magnitude more protection, and I'm willing to pay a little bit with, with a negative experience, with more friction on my side. I'm willing to pay with friction to get a safer experience. I wonder if we'll start seeing banks kind of advertise that as, our goal is to add, we're going to be different from every other business. We're going to try to introduce friction and slow you down, as opposed to facilitate instant everything.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. No, I'm the same way as you, Chris. So I would much rather bank at a bank which takes fraud much, much more seriously. In fact, I'm waiting for a bank which could offer me a mode where I could just lock up my money and like no one can touch it. Even I can't touch it unless I did something like went through like 10 different steps, right?
When you find that bank, let
Yeah.
me know. I would like
Yeah.
to I would like to use them as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
So I feel like
Yeah.
I think the financial services companies, they've got their part that they have to do in seeing
Mhm.
anti-fraud technology move forward. It sounds like a
Mhm.
lot of it at this point, from the consumer perspective, is not that we're necessarily on our own, but we still have to be really careful of consumers and not assume that our banks and our finance institutions are going to protect us as much as we'd like them to.
Mhm.
So are there things that consumers should be watching out for, whether it's cryptocurrency transactions, gift cards, banking, online shopping? What are the things that consumers should be watching out for that should be a red flag to them?
Oh yeah, so a couple of things, right? So number one, uh, if you're getting a text message which is promising you to get rich quickly, don't trust it. Or a text message from IRS saying that you owe the IRS a huge sums of money or someone else, don't trust it. Similarly, when you're getting emails, like don't trust them. Be very vigilant about the source where the email is coming from. You can oftentimes hover over the sender and then
Mhm.
see if it's the domain for the sender is really who you expect it to be. Does it really say irs.gov or it says irsgov123.com, for
Yeah.
example, right? Uh, and then other things you could be doing is that uh, take your personal like online security very seriously. So use a password manager. Don't use passwords which are like don't share passwords across sites. Use
Yeah.
a password manager and set up 2FA, right? Set up a 2FA second factor authentication on all your banking accounts, right? And the second factor also, if the bank offers authenticator based methods, right? Like the technical term for that is TOTP. So the tools that supported are Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator.
Hmm.
These are time-based tokens. So if your bank offers that, definitely use that over SMS because SMS also has a lot of vulnerabilities, right?
Yeah. Although I will say, while SMS is probably the weakest of two-factor authentications, it's better than
Mm-hmm.
nothing. Don't
Yep.
let
Yep.
don't say, oh, because they don't have the most strict tokens
Mm-hmm.
platform in the world, that I'm going to choose nothing, because something is better than nothing.
100% agree with you. Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that, like, I think even for myself, I'm very quick to say, and people make sense to them of, oh yeah, two-factor authentication on my bank accounts, and protect anything that's a financial. These days, I would almost say protecting your email address is
Mm-hmm.
probably is almost more important, because if someone can get your emails, they can reset passwords, they
Oh yeah.
can potentially disable two-factor authentication. Like, our email is almost, the gold standard for getting into everything else in our lives.
100% agree with you on that. Yeah, protect your email like you protect your bank account. Because if you don't have 2FA on your email, then they can reset your email, then reset your bank after that. Right?
Scary, scary. If people
Yeah.
want to learn more about, or any other parting advice before we wrap up here.
Uh, yeah. No, the only other thing I would say is that uh, Yeah, just continue being vigilant, continue being paranoid. That's the only advice I have.
Trust but verify, or be
Yeah.
suspicious of
Mhm.
everything.
Yeah.
If people want to find you or Sardine online, where can they find you?
Yeah, sure. So our website is very simple, sardine.ai. And you can also follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn. And you can also follow me directly if you want. You can just find me on both those social media places. Yeah, easy to find. Just my name, Soups Ranjan.
And we'll make sure to link to all of those in the show notes that you can find online with this episode. Soups, thank you so
Absolutely.
much for coming on the podcast today.
Absolutely. Yeah, been a pleasure speaking with you, Chris.
Thank you.